morning. Thank you all for joining us today. The American public have been crystal clear. 66% of Americans, as you can see in that poll there, believe that President Trump is not doing enough to lower costs for everyday Americans. House Republicans have done the same here in Congress, refusing to take any substantive action to lower costs for everyday Americans. And now, of course, as we speak, congressional Republicans are laying the foundation for President Trump and his administration to rip off American taxpayers. House Democrats won't stand for it, and I want to yield to start the esteemed ranking member of the House Budget Committee, Brendan Boyle, to discuss this further.
Well, thank you to Assistant Leader Neguse, as well as my other colleagues who are here today. Just minutes ago, House Republicans finally released their budget resolution, and I congratulate them on reaching a landmark agreement amongst themselves, we think. But the reality is the details are exactly as we feared and expected. It is a Republican betrayal of the middle class. We just waged a whole long presidential campaign in 2024. And what was the top issue? Top issue here in the United States was the same as most Western democracies. The fact that costs had gotten so high coming out of the post-pandemic era. The inflation crisis has hurt families in America and indeed worldwide. That is what Republicans and Donald Trump talked about during the campaign. So what's in their budget? Nothing to bring costs down. Absolutely nothing. But what they do have is $4.5 trillion of more debt. Remember, this is the same crew, the Tea Party, remember that? This is the same crew that when Democrats are in charge, cry crocodile tears about deficits and debt. But then once they're in office, they blow up the debt far more than any Democratic president or Democratic Congress has. And why? Is it to help the middle class? Is it to help working Americans in my neighborhood in Northeast Philadelphia? No. It's to give massive tax cuts to billionaires and to elite corporations. We've seen this before. 8 years ago, the first massive Trump Republican tax scam, 83% of the money went to the richest 1%. It was the only tax cut in the history of polling that had a majority disapproval rating among the American people. I fully expect that this proposal to even further cut taxes and blow up the deficit and debt will be even greater in terms of its disapproval among the American people. They will feel it in their pockets. They will be hurt most of all by the Republican ripoff, this massive betrayal of the middle class. Thank you.
Buenos dias, good morning, everyone. Assistant Leader Neguse, thank you so much for bringing us together. And our ranking member, Boyle, thank you for your leadership. I want to just point out and remind everyone that the American people are hurting. And we saw the inflation numbers this morning. Inflation is going in the wrong direction. Inflation is going up. The price of eggs is going up. The price of fuel is going up. People are hurting. And last year, the 2024 election was all about listening to the American people and where they were. And they spoke loudly and clearly. And they said, we need Congress and we need the president to do something to lower our costs. When you look at the budget proposal that we all just got, what you're going to hear from Republicans is a lot of smoke and mirrors, and you're going to hear crazy spin. But you have to look past what they're telling you and look at the facts. And this goes for Elon Musk as well. A lot of spin, a lot of smoke and mirrors, and frankly, a lot of lies. Many, many untruths. They are not looking to uncover waste. They are not looking to uncover fraud. And they're not looking to save you money. They're not looking for savings so that they can send big checks back to the American people, so that they can invest in programs that work. What they are doing is shifting the money. They want to cut jobs. They're trying to eliminate much of the federal workforce. They are trying to cut programs, and they're trying to eliminate agencies so they can use that money to further enrich Elon Musk, whose companies, by the way, pay zero taxes right now, whose wealth doubled when Donald Trump was elected. And when you look at what Donald Trump has done, not just with this budget and what congressional Republicans are doing, but giving his billionaire donor, his biggest donor, free rein over the federal government, we are seeing exactly what they are doing. We're asking the American public not to be fooled. We are going to fight this tooth and nail because these programs, these agencies, these federal employees are working on behalf of the American people. These programs actually deliver relief and support to the American people. Elon Musk does not need any more wealth, any more tax breaks. I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Representative Stacey Plaskett.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Assistant Leader Neguse, for convening us, and of course, to our fearless leader on budget, Mr. Boyle, thank you for having us. While the unelected billionaires raid our government and strip it for its parts, and let's be clear, not only has our government been bought, but America has been bought for $300 million. That was the cost of this election, and that's the cost, of, it seems, of America right now. Republicans are handing out trillions in tax cuts to the ultra-wealthy and big corporations at the expense of vital programs and services. Now, many of us who are in the middle class, there may be individuals who are not concerned about Medicaid, who are not concerned about SNAP programs for children, not concerned about school lunches, but you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it because the upper class, the most wealthiest Americans, are not going to pay for the programs that still exist. You Americans are going to pay for it because all of the services that are not going to be there, that the middle class has been paying for to fund their tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy. Trump and his far-right MAGA allies are turning their backs on the very people they claim to represent. You will not hear from the Republicans in this budget about grocery prices. For the record, the price of eggs rose 15% from December to January alone. In my home in the Virgin Islands, where everything has to be imported, $10.99 for a dozen, or $16 for a dozen and a half eggs, for families of 4 that are living off of $40,000 a year. Ground beef, $8 a pound in my home of the Virgin Islands. $7 per gallon for milk. The average price in the United States has been about $4. This is all going to continue. The rise is going to happen. We saw the president today tweet about Biden's inflation rose. Dude, you're the president. That's your inflation. You have to own that now. House Republicans are pushing massive cuts to ensure that the ultra-wealthy, the billionaires like Musk, get their cost cut. As you've heard from Ms. Escobar, much of this is being done to pay for this $4 trillion is through government programs that they are stripping away. Their plan forces the middle class to foot the bill for handouts and actually does nothing to lower costs or help everyday Americans. Nearly 8 million Americans receive health care through Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program, which provide critical care throughout all stages of life. Medicaid covers everything from childbirth to nursing home care and everything in between. While many Americans struggling to put food on the table, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program provides critical support for 40 million Americans, including children, seniors, veterans, working parents. All of that will go away through this new tax scam that they are working on. This is, in fact, a betrayal of the people that elected them. This is a betrayal of all Americans, and the Democratic caucus is not going to stand for it. We are going to continue to inform you and to continue to fight. At this time, I want to introduce a great member from the state of New York, Mr. Tonka.
Thank you, Stacy. I'm Paul Tonko. I represent the capital region of New York State. And earlier you heard Ranking Member Boyle indicate that this Republican budget plan does nothing to reduce costs. As a longstanding member on Energy and Commerce, which covers the healthcare issues, I can tell you many in my district are frightened about this talk about the attack on Medicaid. It's a revenue stream that is very much part of accessibility, affordability to sound health care. While Republicans have tried to shove their plan that cuts massively into various programs to satisfy the thirst of their donors and the wealthiest Americans, now everyday Americans are going to be asked to shoulder the cost. Totally unfair, insensitive. They are already implementing their plans to gut the agencies that serve as watchdogs against wrongdoing and support our national security, and those programs that protect our public health measures and the well-being of Americans. Make no mistake, today they're going after USAID, EPA, the Department of Education, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Those are major industries that protect consumers and advance programs that strengthen the foundation upon which individuals and families function. All of these actions will have a disastrous effect on the American people, not just harming their pocketbooks, but putting their lives at risk. House Democrats built upon many programs that strengthen the middle-income community. Tens of Americans depend on the Affordable Care Act to afford high-quality care. House Democrats built upon that Affordable Care Act in order to deliver lower prices and expanded coverage. Under the Republican budget plan, many millions would see a massive spike in their health insurance costs. Totally unfair, totally unacceptable to the Democratic caucus in this House. In my district alone, thousands of people would see their average premium go up by more than $2,500 per year. For Medicaid, which covers everything from childbirth to nursing home care and everything in between, millions of Americans would see their health care vanish. Think of those who are in Medicaid, Medicare eligible status in nursing homes. That will cover their stay in those nursing homes. What do you do with that community, with that population, when they're in need of institutional care? What's the answer if you're going to cut so deeply into Medicaid? In New York's 20th congressional district, more than 127,000 people on Medicaid would be at risk of losing their health care under the Republican budget plans. So to take away this life-saving coverage is cruel in its own right, but to do it all to further line the pockets of their donors, of the wealthiest Republicans and corporations, is despicable. So we need to do something here with this budget. We're ready to move forward and have negotiations, but we are going to defend those most in need of these programs. Working families, the middle-income community, those looking to ascend the middle-income community. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce a friend and colleague, a strong voice for California, Representative Jimmy Panetta.
Thank you, Paul. And of course, thank you to Assistant Leader Neguse, Ranking Member Boyle, and of course my colleagues up here on the Budget Committee. I appreciate their leadership, especially now when I think all of us in Congress and in this country are experiencing tough times. We're experiencing an aggressive executive branch, a responsive judicial branch, but here on Capitol Hill, we're experiencing a submissive, a destructive, an ineffective, and an irresponsible Republican majority in the legislative branch. Now, they're submissive because they just put forward a budget resolution with deeply harmful proposals just to fulfill the Trump agenda that's going to help the well-off, hurt working families, and harm the economy. This plan starts with extending the 2017 tax cuts at a tune of $5 trillion. Then it increases spending in military and homeland defense at a price of $300 billion. Then they got to figure out how to enact Trump's political promises of tax-exempt tips, overtime, and Social Security benefits at a cost of $3 trillion. But the most destructive part of the plan, as you heard from my colleagues, is how they think they're going to pay for it. The Republican majority is proposing $2 trillion in spending cuts that include significant decreases to Medicaid, to the ACA, food assistance, student loans, and sustainable energy programs. Cuts that will make it harder on working families to afford college, to access health care, and to put food on the table. This leaves them with a sizable hole to fill. Now, right now, if you look at that shell of a budget resolution, it appears they don't know how to do it. And clearly, they can't convince their own members to vote for it. And it's understandable, because the revenue is not going to come from economic growth like they're projecting, because getting $3 trillion in revenue requires a 3.2% sustained real growth, and that's very, very difficult to do. The revenue is not going to come from tariffs, as those add to inflation and bring the market and the economy down. So the only thing left is to add to our debt and deficit, and that means raising the debt ceiling, and they can't even do that on their own. What's worse is that it's irresponsible to add such a significant amount to our $36 trillion in debt that we're in as a country. Let's make it clear. The Republicans are in charge. We understand that. And yes, the reconciliation process is a partisan exercise. But as Republicans go down this destructive and submissive path, they demonstrate ineffectiveness as a governing body. But what is worse is that how irresponsible they are when it comes to our Article I powers here in Congress. Democrats made it clear to Speaker Johnson, we will work with anybody that furthers the values of our congressional districts, but we will also fight anybody, any president, and any opposition that threatens those values. The Republicans' majority's submissive, destructive, ineffective, and irresponsible plan for a budget resolution threatens American values by threatening working families and threatening the future of our economy. That's why Democrats are going to fight back, so that our economy, our security, and our democracy can continue to go forward. Thank you.
So I want to thank Ranking Member Boyle and the distinguished members that have joined me today, each of them members of the Budget Committee that will, of course, participate in the markup tentatively scheduled. We'll see if it proceeds tomorrow. I'll just close on this note and then eager to hear your questions. Last year, President Trump made a promise to the American people regarding inflation. Many of you covered this extensively. He said what? That he would stop inflation on day one. His words, not mine. Stop inflation. As was referenced just today, we see that inflation is going up, CPI. Gas prices going up, grocery prices going up, egg prices going up, car insurance prices going up, you name it. Americans are struggling. Life is getting more expensive under this administration. What's their response? What's the response of this administration and House Republicans? To push forward a $4.5 trillion scheme to gut Medicaid, end it as we know it, and ultimately reward billionaires and corporations. The American people cannot afford that kind of scheme. It is a betrayal of the middle class, and House Democrats won't stand for it. Questions? Nick, and then.
I want to ask about your litigation, the working group. Where do you see as what do you see as the place for Democrats in the litigation landscape, given that we've seen a number of lawsuits from unions, and then what do you see as potential targets for litigation?
It's a great question. First, I would just say more broadly, as you know, Leader Jeffries has made clear to our caucus that this is an all-hands-on-deck moment, and that we all have to be prepared to work together, collectively, collaboratively, to do our part to oppose any executive order or administrative action that is unlawful, unconstitutional, or that would directly harm the American people. And the litigation and rapid response task force that you mentioned is a clearinghouse for us to develop legal strategies We have a number of accomplished lawyers, folks who have deep expertise, and we want to leverage their talents and their strategic thinking. The working group task force will be meeting in the coming days, and so without getting ahead of some of our preliminary conversations, we'll have more to share in the coming days. Yes.
Obviously, the economy is top of mind for Americans. It dominated the election, but several voters supported the Republican Party, supported Donald Trump because of mass deportation plans, because they didn't like the student loan forgiveness plan. There were a lot of other reasons outside of the economy that voters supported the president and Republicans down ballot. What's your message to those voters out there who may support an immigration crackdown, who may support some of the other issues that Donald Trump campaigned on, not realizing that the economy would take the effect that it has so far? What's the message to those voters out there as you move forward?
I would say I think we could spend a great deal of time analyzing the last election and the various reasons why the outcomes, ultimately were a number of different issues that, I think were important to the American people, as we've talked about. But fundamentally, and I agree with Representative Escobar, who I think articulated this well, cost of living was front and center. Inflation was front and center as an active matter of deep interest by the American public in the last election. Republicans were elected to a majority of the House, majority of the Senate, and of course President Trump was elected. They now have the ability to do something about it. The question is why they aren't doing something about it. And you don't have to take my word for it. The CBS poll tells you all you need to know. 66% of Americans believe that this administration isn't doing enough to lower costs. That means Democrats, that means independents, that means Republicans. It means Americans who are struggling to survive each and every day, from Colorado to Texas, New York to California. They are asking us, and we are asking this president and House Republicans, why? Why not address cost of living? Why break your promises that you made to the American people just a few short months ago? I think it's a fair question, and I hope it's one that everyone here asks of the House Republicans, who meanwhile are taking every action conceivable to do the opposite, because we know that this rip-off plan that they're pursuing within the Budget Committee will increase costs, not decrease costs. You don't decrease costs by gutting Medicaid. So that's my view. Yes? No.
Thank you. Veronica with CNN. Can I get you to please address the price, the increase in spending to military and defense and border security? Are you guys going to try and negotiate that number down by any chance?
I'm happy to defer to my colleague, Representative Panetta, who's been a distinguished member of the House Armed Services Committee. I would just say more broadly, that will be something that the Ranking Member Boyle, of course with Budget Democrats and Leader Jeffries, will work through in the coming days. The plan, as we referenced, was just released an hour and a half ago, and it is unclear, by the way, that there is any consensus, far from it, within the Republican caucus. I mean, the Republicans are fighting, House Republicans are fighting amongst each other and can't find their way to putting something on the floor of the House. House Republicans are fighting with Senate Republicans, and as Representative Escobar so eloquently put it, meanwhile, over at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the Trump administration is endeavoring to dismantle a variety of different federal agencies piece by piece. So it is chaos and confusion on their side of the aisle, and will, of course, have internal conversations about the right way forward with respect to particular reductions or increases, as you mentioned, in that space. I don't know if Representative Panetta, you want to, or Representative Escobar, if either of you want to.
No, I mean, look, I think it's clear Democrats support strong national security, and we support our border security. And when it comes to these types of increases, as the Assistant Leader said, these are something we'd be happy to talk with them about. As we know, the reconciliation process is a partisan process. They're going to try to do it on their own. But as Mr. Neguse so artfully said, they're having a hard time doing anything over there, especially when it comes to putting together these types of numbers. So they can say they're for strong national security, strong defense, they want more border security. The question is, and they got to answer this, how do you pay for it? Look, we saw in the 118th Congress, they can't govern by themselves. I think we're going to see going forward in the 119th Congress, we're going to be in the same predicament. Hakeem Jeffries has made it clear to Speaker Johnson, we are more than happy to work with you. But if you start threatening our values, if you start threatening our national security, if you start threatening immigrants who contribute so much to who we are in our economy, in our society, for what we stand for with our humanity, that's when we're going to fight back.
Can I say, I would like to add something because I also served, I'm now on the Appropriations Committee. I was on the Armed Services Committee. I have the privilege of representing Fort Bliss, Texas, the second largest military installation in the country. As my colleague, Mr. Panetta, mentioned, we absolutely support a strong national defense and smart strategic border security. What the Trump administration is doing, though, I think, especially for those of you looking at Pentagon spending, it's going to be very important for all of us to look at how they are spending those dollars. And I'll give you a couple of examples of egregious waste by the Trump administration, not 1 month into this administration. In my district, the Trump administration is deporting migrants from Fort Bliss using C-17s, which cost exponentially more than the regular commercial flights used by the Department of Homeland Security. And I think part of this is being done in order to, for show, but it is costing the American taxpayer exponentially more, and it's coming from DoD spending. He's also opened up Guantanamo for migrants. We don't know exactly who is being sent there. They claim it's folks with lengthy criminal records. I think the state of New Mexico found otherwise, but that is exponentially more expensive than what we have seen so far. So we are going to do a deep dive on all of this, but I think the fundamental issue here is don't believe what they say, watch what they do. They claim that they are targeting waste, fraud, abuse, and they're saving money. The opposite is true. Elon Musk, the fact that he has purview over Pentagon spending, he has something like $15 or $19 billion worth of contracts. Is he going to audit that? Is he going to audit his own contracts, or is he going to look at cost savings there? This is all smoke and mirrors, and we are not going to fall for this. We're not going to let the American people fall for this. None of this is going to help the pain that Americans are feeling when they go to the grocery store, or when they fill up at the pump, or when they try to save for a house, or when they pay their rent. All of it is a sham. And it's a way to make sure that the rich get richer. Fundamentally, it's about greed.
Yes, sir.
2 questions, sir, if I may. The first is wondering if you all had any reaction to Mark Fogel coming back to the U.S. and what the U.S. gave up in order to get him back here. And then second, for you, Mr. Assistant Leader, some of your counterparts in Colorado have warned that these federal funding freezes could affect firefighters who are fighting wildfires. I was wondering if you could talk about what you've seen on that regard.
Yeah. With respect to your first question, we would certainly defer to Ranking Member Meeks, who put out a statement regarding that particular release and would be taking lead with respect to answering the specific question you posed about that particular negotiation. In terms of your second question, and I know Representative Panetta feels the same way, wildland firefighters have been on the front lines defending our communities in Colorado and California and Nevada, across the Rocky Mountain West and the western United States. It is unconscionable that this administration issued a federal funding freeze edict that, in effect, at least for a period of time, and we're working our way through this now, did not include an exemption for federal wildland firefighters. This is particularly around the NPS, the National Park Service, and how the federal wildland firefighters are classified. Bottom line, we know that the chaos and the disruption that the Trump administration is engaged in through DOJ and a variety of other actors will have real-world consequences for communities like the community that I represent in northern Colorado, where wildfires are common and becoming all more pervasive as we transition from wildfire seasons to really wildfires occurring year-round, as we saw just recently in Southern California. This was just recently a topic of conversation in the Natural Resources Committee in a markup that I just left, and I suspect you're going to see our appropriators, Representative Escobar, who's leading ably on that committee, take this particular issue head on. But it's a real challenge, and it's a question that should be posed, as we posed to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the committee, to every Republican who represents a particular area of our country impacted by wildfires. When will they stand up for the wildland firefighters, for the folks at BLM and NPS and the Department of Interior who are doing life-saving work each and every day on behalf of Americans? It's a question that I think is best posed to them. One more question? Yeah, of course. Yeah, Representative Tonko.
I just want to add one other thing to the healthcare discussion, which obviously is epicenter of every family's situation. The largest revenue stream by far for mental health services is Medicaid. We've come a long way in responding to the needs of the mental health community. Think about that. That major revenue stream, in some cases, is the only supply coming to states, a federal revenue stream that is utilized to address their state's mental health population. This could be devastating to many, and we saw increased activity, increased need in the COVID and post-COVID era. And so to do this, the budget needs to be compassionate, not cruel, smart, and not just a frenzy to help the donors of this administration and the wealthiest individuals in our country and corporations that don't pay their fair taxes, if any. So we need to go forward with a good dialogue here to have the Democrats share those values at the table, as Leader Neguse mentioned. And it's important for us to have those discussions.
Thank you all. We appreciate it.